going to backtrack a little and do the reading, which is called You and Yourself by an unknown author. It is rewarding to find someone whom you like, but essential to like yourself. It is quickening to recognize someone as a good and decent human being, but it is indispensable to view yourself as acceptable. It is a delight to discover people who are worthy of respect, admiration, and love, but it is vital to believe yourself deserving of these things. For you cannot live in someone else. You cannot find in yourself in someone else. You cannot be given a life by someone else. Of all the people you will know in a lifetime, you are the only one you will never lose. To the question of your life, you are the only answer. To the problems of your life, you are the only solution. In my sermon today, I'm going to be talking about several rules for self-communication that honors your own worth and dignity. And sometimes when I speak, I find people scribbling things on their orders of service. To save you that trouble, I've made bookmarks, and they're in the coffee area, so you don't have to take notes. Today's message was inspired by the first Unitarian Universalist principle in which we covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. The UU guidelines for visitors, just so you know, they're guidelines for how we can best relate to each other and to the community larger than ourselves. And the first principle is my favorite because it says that we should relate to everyone with respect and honor their inherent worth and value. And we UUs are generally pretty good at honoring other people's worth and dignity. We honor our partners and our children. We affirm the dignity of the poor by providing food and shelter. We support fair wages, we work for justice, and we fight for civil rights. Basically, we try to ensure that everybody is treated fairly and respectfully. But we often fall down when it comes to honoring our own worth and dignity. Our opening hymn today featured the lyric, "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine." But the question is whether we always feel that we deserve to let our inner light, the divine within us, shine. Don't we sometimes feel that it would be egotistical and self-centered to focus on ourself, to focus on our own need to be recognized and valued? This isn't just a UU issue. It's true of anyone who responds to a compliment with, "This old thing," or, "Oh, thanks, I didn't do anything special. It was the whole committee that did all the work." And it's true of anybody who lets a personal insult hang in the air because they don't feel fairly treated, but they don't know how to demand justice for themselves. It's true of anyone who doesn't expect to be respected. The problem, though, is that if we don't honor our own worth and dignity, then no one else will. We need to get comfortable with the realization that inherent worth and dignity isn't something that we have to earn. It's something that we all have simply by virtue of the fact that we are alive and we are trying to do the best that we can. Despite our UU covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth or dignity of all people, which includes ourselves, many of us hear a voice inside our heads that seduces us into committing the sin of feeling less than. This inner critic lures us into telling ourselves, "I'm not good enough." Basically, the inner critic's job is to criticize us mercilessly. It knows our innermost feelings and our doubts, and it blows them up into huge proportions. A friend of mine recently won an award and said, "I hesitate to share this because of my imposter phenomenon," that she feels she's an imposter when she got this award. It was a national award. Researchers have found that the inner critic is always a factor in low self-esteem, and it impedes personal growth and change. The song that I just sang, At 17, is a searing message about the impact of a teenage girl's inner critic. Even with the perspective granted by age, the songwriter's anguish is clear. For too long, her inner critic told her that she deserved to be ignored. If we want to prevent our own anguish, we need to quiet our inner critic and lay claim to our inherent worth and dignity. Well, one way of doing that is to learn a new way of speaking about ourselves, or in speaking to ourselves. We need to be honest, but never brutal. We need to be positive, but also realistic. And we need to learn to see and appreciate our inner light. We all have a running monologue that runs in our heads that silently comments on every situation that we're in, on the feelings and the moments in our day. On average, we talk to ourselves at a rate of 500 words a minute. That's 5 times the rate at which we speak to other people. A great deal of that self-talk is negative commentary from our inner critic. That means that at a speed of 500 words a minute, we may be telling ourselves that we're not good enough. I believe that we need a new language that honors our worth and dignity by following a few rules of self-talk that I will share with you this morning that are on this little. My first rule is the rule of two, T-O-O, not T-W-O. The rule requires us to use caution whenever we put the word to in front of anything that we say about ourselves. You know what I'm talking about. I'm too skinny. I'm too fat. I give too little to charity. I'm too opinionated. I've got too many wrinkles. I'm too picky. I get too little sleep. I'm too shy. I'm too busy. I'm too loud. The word to is our inner critic complaining. After all, whoever says, I'm too nice. I'm too good looking. Well, there was that, I'm too sexy for my skirt, but whatever. The next time that you use the word to, reconsider your choice of words. Be a bit kinder to yourself. Psychologist and cognitive behaviorist Albert Ellis inspired my second rule, the rule of could. Ellis noted that people who use the word should also use modal verbs like ought, must, and have to. Like the word to, these terms are implicitly negative, like I should have gotten more sleep last night, or I ought to clean my house. Observing the emotional stress that such statements created, Ellis coined the phrase, don't should on yourself. Ellis encouraged his clients to use the word could, which puts them in control. I could clean my house, but I would rather not. This directly relates to worth and dignity because having choices is part of feeling that one has some degree of self-determination and control over one's life. It also relates to being able to feel that we have some self-respect when we have some control over our lives. I call my next rule the twisted golden rule. What's the golden rule? Yes. That says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Well, the twisted golden rule says, do unto yourself as you would do unto others. When your inner critic makes a negative comment, ask the following questions. Is this statement true? Would I say this to somebody else, to their face? And if I wouldn't say it to somebody else because it's mean and nasty, why would I say that to myself? It's okay to observe areas in our lives that need improvement. We all need to be honest with ourselves in order to grow. But there's a fine line between honesty and self-denigration. And when we cross that line, we disrespect our worth and dignity. We can acknowledge our flaws and either live with them or work to change them. We can also rethink what we consider to be flaws. A popular warm-up activity with UU teens and other young adults is a game called Scar Stories. It usually begins with everybody sitting in a circle, and they take turns talking about how they got a scar. Sounds kind of morbid, but it's not. And you don't have to show the scar, thank goodness. It can really be enlightening to be in a circle of people who are sharing their scar stories. So let's think about the word scar for a moment. it usually has some negative connotations, right? We warn that wounds will leave a nasty scar. We say that a tragedy scarred someone for life. Well, we all have scars of one type or another. We have scars on our skin, and we have scars on our hearts and on our spirit. We have scars that are physical and emotional. In my version of scar stories, we reinvent the way we look at scars. We ignore the ones that we happened to get. Yeah, I tripped, I got a scar. We focus on the scars that we earned. I prefer this version of scar stories because in our culture and in many cultures, we value things more when we earn them than when we're given these things. So I'm going to give you an example of reinventing a scar story. I have a scar right here on my wrist, and I got it when I walked into a tree branch. It's not a very enlightening story. But how much more self-affirming this story is, and still absolutely true when I tell it this way. I earned my scar on a high school backpacking trip in the Cascade Mountains of California. I hiked through lightning, rain, and hail, survived hypothermia, and raced down a mountain helping other hikers with me forge icy mountain streams. We all got out safely. We all got A's for the backpacking class, too. When I see my scar this way, I feel brave and strong. It's not an ugly scar anymore. I remember the strong bonds that are forged by people who survive a crisis together. With my daughter's permission, I'll share another scar story with you. Ty has 4 lengthy scars on her hips and her thighs from several major surgeries to correct a congenital hip problem. She was born without any hip sockets. She doesn't pay the scars much mind because she's fine now. And she's had the scars since the age of 3. And I think, too, that she bought into the argument that we repeated time and time again, that these were badges of courage. When I see the scars, though, I remember a bubbly little girl who did something before surgery that should have been nearly impossible. Without hip sockets to hold her thigh bones into her pelvis, she taught herself to crawl, to climb, and to walk, despite what doctors say would have been considerable and constant pain. The fact that she laughed her way through normal developmental milestones says an enormous amount of the power of the human spirit when one focuses on moving forward instead of the physical flaws that could hold us back. Dana Jennings wrote this about scars in a piece for the New York Times. For all the potential tales of woe that they suggest, scars are also signposts of optimism. If your body is game enough to knit itself back together after a hard physical lesson, to make scar tissue, that means you're still alive and you're on the path toward healing. Scars, perhaps, were the primal tattoos, marks of distinction that showed you had been tried and had survived the test. I found my abdominal scars to be the most profound. They vividly remind me that skilled surgeons unlocked me with their scalpels, took out what had to be taken, sewed me back up, and saved my life. It's almost as if they left their life-giving signatures on my flawed flesh. The scars remind me, too, that in this vain culture, our vanity sometimes needs to be punctured and deflated, and that's not such a bad thing. To paraphrase Ecclesiastes, it is better to be a scarred and living dog than to be a dead lion. It's not that I'm proud of my scars, but I'm not embarrassed by them either. More than anything, I relish the stories they tell. I've always believed in the power of stories, and I certainly believe in the power of scars. So I'd like to spend a few minutes inviting you to share your scar stories. Scar stories that help you appreciate a new perspective of yourself and perhaps each other. What I'd like to invite you to do is to say very briefly, you don't have to say where the scar is,